A few weeks ago, I started what I intend to be a series of conversations with a very important and yet, I think, unsung figure in comics history, most particularly in the 21st century as a writer, but also as a protector of the legacies of some of the giants in the comics industry from the 20th century and 21st. And that is Clifford Meth. And so, in this piece of the conversation, we're going to talk to introduce you to him, his work. He's got an upcoming memoir, I guess co-written, collated by Danny Fingeroth, who is also a major figure in Marvel Comics history. And it's kind of interesting because Clifford Meth and I met through Harlan Ellison, even though I have never did actually get to meet Harlan Ellison. Uh, since we had this conversation, we lost two giants in the comics industry, and that was George Perez, somewhat expected, sadly, and quite unexpected, at least from where I sit, Neal Adams. And in this conversation, you will hear Clifford allude to some of his work with Neal Adams, and it's very important. And we will, in the second part, which we have yet to record as of right now, talk about the legacy of both these giants. My intention had been to keep these conversational snippets down to like about 10 minutes apiece, kind of serialize and have fun. But I think when that conversation happens, it will be a bit longer. At any rate, please, I'd like to introduce you now to Clifford, here with Clifford Meth, who is a writer, raconteur, I would say, and certainly protector of comics creators' legacies. Is that, if that's fair? This is going to be the first of a few conversations that we have, because it's an interesting time for comics in general and for writing in general and publication. And today we're going to focus on, you were just telling me you are embarking upon the project of actually writing your, well, let's not make it sound too salacious, but, the tell-all book about a life working with some of the giants, right, in comics and in science fiction.
It's a memoir in a lot of ways. I wouldn't call it autobiography because it's being written by other people sort of simultaneously. Aardwolf, in its final project, Aardwolf Publishing, engaged Danny Fingeroth and a few other folks to go and interview people who have known me for a long time, going back 40, 50, 60 years, sort of to say, how did this kid who was in a whole lot of trouble get to this point where people are hiring him to get them out of trouble? And that was kind of the gist of things. I wouldn't say I was a troubled kid, but I was certainly a carrier, if you know what I mean. And Danny's done a terrific job. He's gone back and spoken, tracked down people and spoken with people who knew me when I was pretty small and, sometimes wearing handcuffs. And it was a lot of fun listening to these interviews and drumming up things. I said, Danny, I'm not looking for any praise at all. And he said, oh, you're not getting any. So it was a lot of fun seeing this stuff come together. I'm at a point in my career now where, frankly, I've gotten calls from the White House and had me write things for them. And it's pretty cool. I write a lot of things for elected officials. I've ghostwritten my whole life for celebrities, many of which I've never been able to talk about the fact that I was writing for them, because that's sort of part of the
mystique.
Yeah, when you're a ghost, you kind of keep it to yourself. And that's expected until they're not around anymore or until they don't care anymore. So I've gotten permission from people to talk about these things. But most of my career, or at least my early career, I was behind the scenes, either as a journalist or as a ghostwriter, and interviewing and promoting and hanging out with some fairly well-known people in rock and roll, in entertainment, and in business. So there's some good stories to tell.
Well, it's interesting that you're saying this format with Danny interviewing other people about you, because you may not remember that the way we actually met, and this is still virtually, like we were just talking about when we actually encountered each other at a Comic-Con, but I'd known you for years. But what it was Jason Sachs interviewed Harlan Ellison about you. And so, I ran this piece that was by Jason about you, but it was the interview with Harlan. So our first encounters were kind of third person.
That's right. I remember that. God, I miss him. I miss him more than I miss just about everybody else that I missed together. He was really one of a kind, Harlan. Very, very special friend. And and he will certainly make appearances in Promises to Rockaway.
Yeah. So, and we're talking in memoir form that, you've certainly got the ghostwriting, but let's talk a little bit to direct people to where your name has appeared, which is you've done comics. You years ago had an IDW project called Snaked, which was a horror. I'm trying to pull it back in my mind. That was because that was like 2008, right? Um,
It was a political horror story, like most political stories.
yes, and you've certainly done a lot of interesting, interesting science fiction slash horror slash. Well, I guess we say you've never pulled punches. You've always had a very strong voice there. So, in Promises to Rockaway, how much of this is going to be you versus is it just Danny saying I'm curating?
Oh, Danny's not actually writing. I mean, unless you count the questions as writing, and I've guided a lot of that, and so did my publishing partner Jim Reber. But no, but Danny's good at keeping the conversation going. But you'll hear other people's voices, but at the end of the day, it's my project. I just there's times when I want the dialogue to come directly from my memory, and there's times when I want to really go back and find out, really what was said and what was said when I wasn't in the room. So it's a very fun project. I've been working on this now for several years. It's taking way longer than I would have thought it would. But I specifically engaged Danny after reading his biography on Stan Lee, which I thought was nicely done.
Yeah, that it was, and you said several years because I think in the meantime we've had a book of essays too called I want to say it was Comic Book Babylon, which I have somewhere on my shelf. Read it was very
That's got to be almost 10 years old now. I don't know how long ago I did that. I have
yeah.
a bad memory about when things come out. That was a book that I really enjoyed writing. I had the source material was columns that I had been doing, oddly enough, for Jason Sachs and a few other people. So that was the skeleton of that book, and then sort of the between the scenes and what really happened. There's what I wrote, and then there's what really happened. So I decided to write what really happened in between the columns. I was very, very pleased with that book. Very, very, very happy that
and,
the
and
way
that
it came out.
Yeah, and that came out from Aardwolf, and that has been. I feel like this is blending into a bunch of different topics about. Well, I mean, this is your memoir, right? That Aardwolf Publishing has been a very loomed large in your professional, I guess, comics commentary career, and more in kind of again working with the legacies of certain creators, most particularly Dave Cockrum. But you mentioned, this is their final project. So
Well, Aardwolf
what's going on?
Was and is owned. Was a limited liability corporation. Was owned by myself and my friend of many years, Jim Reber. And Jim got very sick a few years ago. Got something that he wasn't going to get better from. So we decided it was time to pull back, finish projects that were in the drawer, and let Aardwolf go to sleep happily. There's been some talk between him and I of letting somebody else come in and handle it, but Jim was the business behind Aardwolf. Jim did the graphics. Jim did a lot of things. I was sort of the front man. I was the relationships guy. He wasn't a comics guy at all. Jim didn't grow up reading comics or have any feeling for any of the people that we were working with, other than the fact that he got to know them through me. But he wasn't a fan. He wasn't conscious of their work. So I'm not sure if Aardwolf Publishing will do anything ever after this. Maybe. We'll see. I certainly am not going to be running a business by myself. I was never running the business at all. That was always Jim.
Okay, but in its back catalog, if you want to call it that, there have been so many things like, like I said, I mentioned Dave Cockrum. I backed a Kickstarter a few years back with the Futurians, that property, and I know that there are, I think, you're still doing some work with Dave's estate,
Well,
right? Or
to
characters.
represent Patey and the estate when the estate needs representation. Patey receives royalties for the rest of her life based on a deal that Neal Adams and I closed on Dave's behalf with Marvel. It was a fairly well publicized story. I think we were the first to actually get Marvel to give in and go backwards and recreate a royalty structure, and it was a pretty good deal for the Cockrums. And of course, Dave was dying at the time. He had just come out of a diabetic coma when we were concluding the negotiations, so to speak. But Patty's taken care of forever, and as such, she has entrusted me to continue representing Dave's other intellectual property in perpetuity. I have a deal offered right now from, I don't want to say, but it's one of the bigger publishers. And frankly, Marvel has wanted to get their hands on the Futurians for a long time. A lot of people would love to have the Futurians because it's a nice property. It's a nice intellectual property. Mm-hmm. But Patty insists on creative control, and that keeps a lot of people away from wanting to do business with us at this stage of the game. But in any event, we will do more. And as far as representing the estate, yes, I continue to. I watch over her rights, so to speak, and making sure they don't get violated.
And that's good. You've had other contributors as well. I mean, I like saying about the Futurians because I certainly had focused on that. But in thinking of Aardwolf, certainly they published your fiction. There's some stuff I want to say there was even. Am I crazy to think J. Michael Straczynski had done something with you guys? So no. I was crazy, but I know there were other creators. You certainly have had with Gene Colan as well.
Yeah, sure, we did a lot with Gene.
Yeah, and for those who are curious, I think you can read a little bit about the work that was done. Actually, is in Marvel Comics, The Untold Story, because obviously that the issue with Dave Cockrum was a turning point. And I think, and the next time we talk, I'd really love to talk about that, the protecting of those legacies,
sure.
and so forth. I'm running out of the time we had allotted for today, but Cliff, it's really great to. This is weird. This is like only the second time face to face ever, and yet knowing each other for probably now 15, 16 years, online. So
comics is a small world, and we all seem to know each other virtually. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. And that's another conversation to have. So thank you very much for your time today. And
thank you for your interest.
We'll continue. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any Fanboy Planet video content. And remember, use your powers for good.